Dear students, welcome back to the lessons on Chapter 9 of your history textbook, The Making of the National Movement. In this lesson, we will be further studying the events that took place in the freedom struggle against the British rule. We will be studying the events of freedom struggle from the 1910s to the 1930s. The major concepts of today's lesson are to understand the impact of World War I on India, explore Gandhiji's efforts in South Africa, study Gandhiji's advent to India, examine the movements like Rowlatt Satyagraha, non-cooperation and Khilafat movement, analyze the importance of these movements. After studying today's lesson, you will be able to explain the influence of contemporary world on India's freedom struggle, interpret the role of Gandhiji in uniting masses against the British, analyze the events of freedom struggle from the 1910s to the 1930s. Dear students, in the previous episode, you studied about the emergence of nationalism in India, the birth of the Indian National Congress and the All India Muslim League. You studied the ideologies of the moderates, the radicals and the revolutionaries such as Dadabhai Naoroji, Bipin Chandra Pal, Bal Gangadhar Tilak and Lala Lajpat Rai and so on. You understood the concept of Swaraj, the partition of Bengal and the importance of the Swadeshi movement. While all this was happening in India, some major world events were taking place in world history. Can you guess what were they? Yes, it was the period of the First World War, which was fought between 1914 to 1918. Britain was also a part of the First World War and it required a lot of weapons and soldiers. Where would they get them? Yes, they got it from the colonies of the British. India, being a colony of the British, had to supply soldiers and weapons. Many industries came up in India to meet the demands of the war, about which you have studied in Chapter 6. Immediately after the First World War, another major event happened in world history, that was the Russian Revolution, about which you will study in Class 9. The Russian Revolution was fought by the peasants, the workers and middle class men of the Soviet Union against the rich and oppressive upper classes. You may ask as to what is the relation of these events with India's freedom struggle. After the First World War ended, the Indian soldiers who had joined the British Army returned to their homelands, but with the knowledge of world politics. These soldiers had seen and understood how many other countries were also colonized by the British. They heard stories of the colonization throughout their journey. This made them think about the idea of throwing away the British from their homeland, India as well. Similarly, the Russian Revolution inspired Indian scholars and leaders. It gave them the confidence that if the countrymen united against the superpower, they could definitely attain victory. Hence, these two events in world history significantly influenced the freedom struggle movement in India. But how was the freedom struggle fought after the Swadeshi movement? What were the movements launched against the British? What were the ideals of Mahatma Gandhiji? Let us explore as we further study this chapter. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born on 2nd of October 1869. His birthday is celebrated as Gandhi Jayanti throughout the country. Gandhiji finished his schooling and went to England for the study of law. He then went to South Africa to practice law. You would have heard of many stories of Gandhiji throughout your childhood. Here is one such incident that changed Gandhiji's life forever. While he was traveling by train in South Africa, despite carrying a first-class ticket, Gandhiji was thrown out of the train because a white man complained of an Indian sharing space with him. From there on, Gandhiji led non-violent movements against the white people who oppressed the native Africans and Indians. His idea of Satyagraha took birth in South Africa and he came to be known as a leader worldwide. Leaders in India felt that Gandhiji's motherland needed him the most. Therefore, upon the request of Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Gandhiji returned to India on 9th of January 1915, which is celebrated as Pravasi Bharatiya Divas every year. Gandhiji was asked to travel India for a year to understand the situation of the country and the sentiments of the people. During his travel, Gandhiji found several instances where the local people were oppressed by the British rule. He identified the problems of the people in different regions and found ways to unite them to a single goal, that was to free India. Thus, Gandhiji started his first satyagraha in India at Champaran, Bihar in 1917. Here, the indigo cultivators were oppressed by their landlords, as you have studied in chapter 3. Soon after this, Gandhiji launched two more movements in 1918, one at Kheda and the other at Ahmedabad, both in Gujarat. All these movements were a success. This made Gandhiji a potential leader who could free India from the clutches of the British. How was Gandhiji different from other leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji and Bal Gangadhar Tilak, about whom you have studied in the previous episode? Can you point out the unique quality of Mahatma Gandhiji? Yes, his motto of non-violence or satyagraha was completely different from the earlier leaders. He was the only leader in the world who believed that non-violence or satyagraha could be a strategy of freedom struggle. What were the views of Gandhiji on satyagraha? Here is what he said. Satyagraha is pure soul force. Truth is the very substance of the soul. That is why this force is called satyagraha. The soul is informed with knowledge. In it burns the flame of love. Non-violence is the supreme dharma. These views of Gandhiji reflects the wisdom and knowledge the Mahatma comprised. These ideologies significantly contributed in the freedom struggle movement of India. These movements made people trust Gandhiji and his ideologies. People started believing him as a leader. It was now time to launch a nationwide movement against the British rule. The opportunity came with the passing of the Rowlatt Act by the British in 1919. What was the Rowlatt Act? The Rowlatt Act was an act passed by the British that allowed detention of political leaders without trial for 2 years. This meant that the British could arrest any leader without any specific reason for a period of 2 years. Was such a practice correct? No. This act provided the British with immense powers against the leaders of India. Thus, Gandhiji decided to launch the Rowlatt Satyagraha against the Rowlatt Act on the 6th of April 1919. To suppress these hartals, the British used lathi charge and fired bullets in the air. They arrested many local leaders for involving in the Rowlatt Satyagraha. They imposed the martial law, which prevented too many people from gathering at one place. This was made to control the hartal. On 13th of April 1919, a very infamous event took place in the history of India. That was the Jalyan Wallabag massacre. You would have heard of this from your parents or teachers. The Jalyan Wallabag was a garden in Amritsar which had a single entry exit gate where people had gathered to celebrate the festival of Baisakhi. These people were not aware of the martial law that was imposed by the British. When the commander, General Dyer, got to know about the gathering, he ordered the immediate closing of gates and fired bullets, killing almost everyone in the garden. Why did General Dyer take up this drastic step? He said that the killing of people at the Jallianwala Bagh was to create a sense of fear among the Indians that if they protested against the British, this is what would happen to them. What do you think about General Dyer's action of killing so many innocent people? What was the reaction of Indians to this incident? When the news of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre spread across the country, there were strikes, clashes with the police and attacks on government buildings. Seeing this violence spread, Gandhiji immediately called off the Rowlatt Satyagraha. The Rowlatt Satyagraha established Gandhiji as a true leader. A commission was set up by the British that found General Dyer guilty for killing people at the Jalyan Wallabag. Finally, the Rowlatt Act was withdrawn by the British in 1922. With the end of the Rowlatt Satyagraha, Gandhiji was looking for other ways through which he could unite Indians for another struggle. This opportunity came directly from the World War I, about which we studied some time ago. During World War I, Britain was at war with the Ottoman Empire in Turkey. The war ended in 1919 with the victory of the Britain. Britain imposed a harsh treaty on the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, seizing many territories from the empire. This rude and unjust behavior of the British against the Sultan of the Islamic world, or what we call Caliph, was not accepted by the Muslims all over the world. In India too, a decision was taken by Shaukat Ali and Muhammad Ali to launch a movement against the British. Gandhiji saw this as an opportunity to unite both Hindus and Muslims against the British. Thus, Gandhiji, along with the Ali brothers, launched the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement. What did Gandhiji mean by non-cooperation? In his book Hind Swaraj, Gandhiji said that the British rule was established in India with the cooperation of the Indians and had survived till date only because of this cooperation. If Indians refused to cooperate with the British rule would collapse within a year and Swaraj would be attained. Thus, the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement was launched, where Muslims joined the movement in protest against the mistreatment of their caliph, while Hindus joined the movement in revenge of the Jalyan Wallabag massacre. You may ask as to how was this movement different from the earlier ones? How did the people react to this movement? The movement started with the middle class participation in the cities. Students left the schools and colleges that were controlled by the government, headmasters and teachers resigned, and lawyers gave up their legal practice. Foreign goods were boycotted, liquor shops picketed, and foreign cloth was burnt in huge bonfires. As the movement spread, people began discarding the foreign cloth and started wearing cloth that was made in India. Thus, the cotton textile production and handloom industries went up. From the cities, the movement spread to the countryside. Here, the movement was against the landlords and talukdars who demanded high rent from the peasants. But soon, the movement took a new turn. The movement was interpreted differently by different people. Some tribals used this as an opportunity to regain their tribal rights and gain entry into the forests. Some communities in Punjab used this movement to remove corrupt mahants from the gurudwaras. In Assam, the tea workers used this opportunity to demand high wages for working in tea plantations. Within a year, the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement had spread throughout the country, where people were protesting against the British in a peaceful manner. But soon, some people started to pick up violence. One such incident was that of the Chauri Chaura. In February 1922, the police had fired on a peaceful demonstration of the peasants. Immediately, the peasants set fire to a police station in Chauri Chaura, killing 22 policemen. Gandhiji was deeply saddened by this incident and called off the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement. Was this movement a success or a failure? Let us analyze. For the first time in India's freedom struggle, a movement had spread throughout the countries where people from the cities, villages and tribal areas united to fight against the British through non-violence. The freedom struggle was no longer a struggle of the rich and educated class, but it was the struggle of every citizen. Thousands of workers, peasants and artisans joined this movement. What made these people join this movement in such large numbers? They appreciated the fact that Gandhiji lived like them, dressed like them, and spoke their language. Unlike other leaders, Gandhiji did not stand apart from the common folk. This made them feel that Gandhiji could understand their problems and thus established a relation with them. At some places, such as in Awadh, Bihar and Assam, people started associating Gandhiji as a godly figure. They thought that Gandhiji was sent by God to help them against the British. They believed that Gandhiji could do miracles with his ideology. This made large number of people join the movement. Now can you answer the question, was this movement a success or a failure? After the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement ended, the leaders of the Indian National Congress initiated a new strategy to further expand the freedom struggle. Leaders such as Chittaranjan Das and Motilal Nehru believed that Indians should fight the council elections to enter the government and influence British policies. On the other hand, through sincere social work in the 1920s, Gandhiji's followers were able to expand their support base. This proved to be very useful while launching the civil disobedience movement, about which you will study in the next episode. Between the 1920s and 1930s, two very important events took place in India's freedom struggle. One of them was the demonstration against the Simon Commission in 1928. What was the Simon Commission? In 1927, the British government in England set up a commission under Sir John Simon to look into India's policies and suggest changes. The problem with this commission was that all of its members were the British people. It consisted of no Indian. Thus, the Indian National Congress and the Muslim League started a demonstration against the Simon Commission. When the commission arrived in 1928, it was treated with black flags and slogans such as "Simon, go back." In Lahore as well, a demonstration was held against the Simon Commission, where veteran leader Lala Lajpat Rai participated. In order to control the demonstration, the British ordered lathi charge, where Lala Lajpat Rai was injured and he died. The death of Lala Lajpat Rai due to the injuries of lathi charge spread throughout the country. One such revolutionary nationalist who was saddened by this incident was Bhagat Singh. Bhagat Singh, along with Chandrasekhar Azad and Rajguru, killed the policeman who was involved in the lathi charge of Lala Lajpat Rai. Another incident happened in 1929 when Bhagat Singh and B.K. Dutt threw two bombs inside the Parliament building, shouting "Inqilab Zindabad." They surrendered themselves and were hanged for this incident on 23 March 1931. Bhagat Singh believed that only the loud Indian voices could make the deaf British hear. His ideologies were not of non-violence like Gandhiji, but that does not mean that he was not a true patriot. Every freedom fighter used different methods and propagated different ideologies. But the ultimate goal of every freedom fighter was the same. That was to see an independent India. While all this was happening, the Indian National Congress planned for their next strategy against the British rule. Under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Purna Swaraj Declaration was formalized in 1929. According to the Purna Swaraj Declaration, 26th of January 1930 was to be celebrated as the Independence Day of India every year. But people did not actively participate in this event. Thus, Gandhiji thought to relate the idea of Purna Swaraj with the common day life of the people. He started what was called the Salt Satyagraha, about which you will study in the next episode. Before we conclude this session, did you notice any familiarity with the date of the Purna Swaraj Declaration? Was there anything else that happened on 26th of January in Indian history? Yes, 26th of January is celebrated as the Republic Day of India. You have studied in your previous classes that our Constitution was adopted on the 26th of November 1949 and was enacted on 26th of January 1950. Why did we wait for these 2 months? It was because the date of 26th January was very important in the freedom struggle of India. It was the date when the Purna Swaraj Declaration was made. Therefore, in order to respect and remember this event, our Constitution was enacted on the 26th of January 1950. Dear students, that brings us to the end of this lesson. Let us recall what we have learnt. The world events of World War I and the Russian Revolution influenced India's freedom struggle. Gandhiji returned to India in 1915 after taking up many movements in South Africa. Gandhiji began with the Champaran movement in 1917 and satyagrahas in Kheda and Ahmedabad in 1918. His first nationwide movement came with the Rowlatt Satyagraha on 6th of April 1919. During the Satyagraha, the infamous incident of Jalyan Wallabag Massacre happened in Amritsar on 13th of April 1919, with General Dyer firing on the people inside the garden. Gandhiji launched the non-cooperation and Khilafat movement in 1921. People from cities, villages and tribal regions actively participated in this movement. Gandhiji stopped this movement after the incident of Chauri Chaura, where 22 policemen were killed. In 1928, people launched a demonstration against the Simon Commission with slogans of "Go back, Simon." The Indian National Congress formalized the Purna Swaraj Declaration on 26th of January 1930, which was to be celebrated as Independence Day. Let us do. Find out about Gandhiji's association with the Charkha and his lifestyle at his ashram in Ahmedabad. Why is his ideology important to the world? Why should we remember him? Make a report and submit it to your teacher. Activity. What activities would you take up in your school as a mark of respect for Gandhiji and his ideologies? Discuss with your friends. Dear students, hope you enjoyed today's class. In the next episode, you will be studying the final stages of India's freedom struggle, that is, the civil disobedience movement and the Quit India movement. You will also study the events that led to India's independence and partition. Thank you.